With all the new Luminar Neo extensions now available, it's really fun to experiment and try them all out. But you have to be really careful when you're using background removal AI because you can make a really big mess really easily. So if you want to avoid disaster and not make the most common mistakes when using background removal and combining images, then you need to watch this video. In this tutorial, I'll give you 6 tips to help you avoid ruining your photos and making some major photo editing faux pas. Hi, I'm Darlene with Digital Photo Mentor, and if you want to learn all about photo editing, you're in the right place. So let's dig in and take a look at the 6 mistakes that you want to avoid making. Mistake number 1. The first thing you want to do is choose your images wisely. Avoid images that are going to be really difficult, first of all, to cut the background out, and second of all, to blend with another image. I've chosen these few images to show you what I mean. And it's not because that it's difficult to cut out a dog or an animal with fur. Quite the contrary. With the background removal tool, it's actually quite easy. The challenge is from the original image itself. Let's take a look at this first one. We have a black dog on a black background, and part of the dog is literally disappearing into the background. I already tried background removal AI on this image, and as suspected, it had some issues. This is the best that I could do. The reason it had difficulty is because there's no contrast. Background removal AI is looking for the edges of things. So when you have a subject that is clearly defined against the background, it's going to be much easier. Here we see the dog's face and the background are literally the same tone with no detail. So it's impossible to even find the edge manually. Here's another one that's a really cute image with nice lighting that would cut out really nicely, except for the problem of the grass coming in front of the dog. This is a result I got from background removal. When we zoom in, you can see it actually did a really nice job around the dog and on the fur, but I still have all these blades of grass left in front of the dog. So if I was going to use this image of the dog and put it on a new background, I'd have to literally go and clone out all the grass. So this is about choosing an image that's harder and makes more work for yourself than one that's going to be easier, especially if you're new to this kind of editing. In this final example, I wanted to show you what happens when the backgrounds don't match. The original image of this dog has a really strong red background. I was able to use the background removal AI tool to cut him out, but when you put him on a new image, you can still see the red outline of the other background from the old image. So I'd have to go in and do a lot more work to get rid of some of that red outline around him, as opposed to choosing a different image. So while that's not impossible, again, it's just more work. So choose your original images carefully. Choose high quality original images where the subject stands out and is easier to cut out. And then place your cutout object on a background with similar tones and colors, or make sure the background in the original is neutral, so it can go anywhere. And one thing I want to stress here about choosing your images, especially with the first example of the black dog on the black background, is set your expectations for what the software can do realistically. Asking the software to cut out that dog when you can't even visually see the edge is setting yourself up for failure. So again, choose wisely and pick images that are going to be easier to work with. Set yourself up for success. Tip number 2, choose the right object and background combination. So we already looked at this dog on the brown couch, and the red background from the original image is a problem. Let's see what happens when we make a better combination. Take a look at this image of the living room with the kitty sleeping on the sofa. Would it surprise you to see the original? Here's the original image of the cat that I cut out and put onto the image of the couch. It's believable for a number of reasons. First of all, the tones match better than the other dog with the red background. Second of all, the size and scale of the cat makes sense with that of the furniture. If you are a cat owner or a cat lover like me, you'll know that this is a very typical position, so it's very believable. This is an example image that I came up with in a previous video where I demonstrated how to use the background removal AI tool inside Luminar Neo. I'll put a link to that video in the description area below for you. I'm using this example as what not to do. The plane and the dog were not part of this original scene, and they kind of don't make sense. They don't look believable, and they look like they've been added. So make sure that your combination of object and background makes sense together. For example, don't put an image of a koala bear in the Arctic or flamingos in Canada. If you're making a fantasy style image or just having fun, then all bets are off and I say just go for it. But if you're going for believability and realism, make sure that the object and the background in which you place it make sense and belong together. Don't put an animal or an object in a setting where it wouldn't naturally appear. Tip number 3. This is the most important thing. If you only remember one point from this tutorial, this is the one you want to make note of. The lighting must match. What I mean by that is both the direction of light and the quality of light must be the same in the subject or the object that you've cut out and in the background, and it will be clear that there's something wrong. This is without a doubt the biggest, most common mistake that beginners especially make when combining images. Let's take a look at some examples. I'm going to be using this image of this hot air balloon. Most of the images I'm using for this demonstration are from the stock website Unsplash.com. If you want to download some of the images and follow along, you can. I'll put a link to a collection for you in the description area below. These are all royalty-free images, so you can download them at no charge. This is the original image of the balloon, and again, because this was a very straightforward subject to cut out, the edges are nice and clean, and the background is a different color, this was a really easy one to remove the background. Now that I've got the balloon, there's a couple of different ways that you can change the background. You can export this image as a PNG, so using the Luminar Neo export function, just make sure that you choose PNG and check off transparency. Then you can use this image to add it as a new layer onto another one. Or you can just add layers here. So I've already done that with a couple of other images in the background here. Let's take a look. What I want you to make note of here is the lighting quality and direction in the background image. It looks like the light is fairly flat or diffuse and a hazy type of day. So the light is a little bit non-directional. If we zoom in, we can kind of see there's some shadows here in these tracks on the grass, but there isn't any long shadows. So the light on the balloon doesn't match. When we look at the original of the balloon, it was a bright sunny day, and you can see the light coming from the left side of this image and the shadows on the right. Let's make the balloon a little smaller and put it in the sky. So if you want this image to work, you need to make sure the balloon matches. That's easy enough to do. We can simply tone down the contrast using the develop tool, like so, and maybe even lower the saturation. Can you see the difference? Before and after. Now the balloon matches better to the background image, which has softer, more muted tones and colors. Take a look at the next example. Remember, the light is coming from the left on the balloon, and likewise, it's coming from the same direction on the background image of the mountain. The difference here is that there's a little bit of haze or fog in the background image. So I would edit the balloon once again to match better. But at least the lighting direction is correct. Let me reverse it so that you can see what I'm talking about. Now the light on the balloon is coming from this direction and the light on the mountain is coming from the left. So they don't match. So when you place your object in the background, when there's a clear direction of light, make sure that they match. If you can flip the object or the background like I did here, that could be the solution that you need. If not, you may have to choose a different image. In this example, I've added the balloon as a new layer on top of this landscape. So I exported the balloon as a PNG and then added it back in. Let's make it a little smaller. And once again, we have to pay close attention to the direction of light. Pretty obvious in the background, the sun is right here over this hill. So we need to make sure that the balloon is either over here, so the light direction is hitting the balloon this way, or if I put it over here, I know that I need to flip it this way. Can you see the difference? Also make note of the balloon position. If I put it here, for example, the light would be coming from behind the balloon and it would be backlit. There isn't an easy way of replicating or faking that in Luminar. You could try the sun rays tool, but it doesn't match the background now. So again, the tip is make sure that the lighting direction and quality matches. If there's soft light on the subject, make sure there's soft light on the background, and vice versa. Here's another example that doesn't match. The lighting on this little plane is very harsh and contrasty and coming from above. And the background has very soft, shadowless lighting. So getting these to match would be harder. It would need a little bit more work, but once again, I could use the Develop tool to help blend them a little bit nicer. Can you see the difference before and after? Ideally though, choosing two images that blend better and match for lighting is a better choice. Here's another example of a lighting mismatch. The image of the dog has very soft light coming from above. The image of the lamb, which I've put in the background, has very contrasty lighting taken in the bright sun. When you put the two together, something visually doesn't make sense. So even a viewer who is not a photographer will pick up on this and just make note that something doesn't feel right about this image. And in regards to lighting, you want to also make note that shadows are really important as well. You'll notice that the dog doesn't have one. So when you put an image into another scene, there's always going to be a shadow somewhere. You need to make sure that it makes sense. So always pay attention to the lighting direction and the shadows. Tip number 4 carries on from number 3, and that is edit the new object layer to match the background. So what I mean by that is match the color and tone and level of contrast. In this image of the little biplane that I added to the background of the tree, the plane has too much contrast and it doesn't make sense lighting wise. We just talked about that. So to edit it, I will just lower the contrast using the Develop tool. Perhaps bring the highlights down. And usually when the lighting is softer, you'll have more muted colors as well. So don't forget to bring the saturation down. I might warm this up a tiny little bit just to get it to match. Let's look at the before. See how the plane looks literally copied and pasted in? And after, now it looks believable that the plane could actually be in that scene. In another example, if I put this image of the balloon into this sunset scene, remember the lighting direction must match. We know that the sun is here roughly and the light is coming from this way. So I'm going to put the balloon over here, maybe make it a little smaller. And then I'm going to do the same thing to give it a little bit more warmth to match the background image. It's got a lot more yellow and pink. Likewise, bring the contrast down. See how that matches a little better? This is the before and after. We can also do something like apply a LUT, which is the mood tool in Luminar Neo, to both the bottom and top layer to make them match a little better. Here I've applied the smoky LUT at opacity or amount 50 to both layers. See how much nicer they blend and match now? It's increased the contrast of the background layer, which matches the balloon a little nicer. So that's a little trick to get your layers to match in terms of color. And here's a different one from a different LUT collection that has enhanced the color and made them both match as well. So the possibilities here are endless. The key is to matching everything together. The other things you want to make sure to match are grain or noise levels to make sure that the cutout image matches the background. So if your cutout image has grain or noise, add some to the background as well. Tip number 5 is look out for perspective mismatches as well. Things like the lens used, wide versus telephoto, camera angle, and size and position of the subject all make a big difference. Let's take a look at an example that doesn't work. Here's our sunset scene once again, and I've added an image of a plane. Can you see the problem with perspective difference between these two images? Let me give you a hint. The sunset is taken from the top of a hill looking down. The plane is taken looking up. They don't match. You can't possibly be looking in both directions at the same time. If we take a closer look, the other thing that doesn't match is the lighting direction. Remember, the light or the sun is over here on the right. You can see the highlight on the plane on the left. Now that could be easily fixed by flipping the plane, but you can't fix a perspective problem like this. In this ridiculous combination, the dog and the plane are way out of size perspective. The dog looks enormous, and the plane just doesn't seem right. So when you place objects, make sure that the size and perspective match and make sense visually. With this combination of the kitty and the sofa, unless the kitty's been eating his Wheaties, he's a little too big, perspective and scale-wise. Can you see something else in this combination that doesn't match that I haven't mentioned? I'll give you a hint. Look for sharpness. If we zoom in, you'll notice that the kitty's face is sharp, but he's got a shallow depth of field, and the back part of the kitty is out of focus. But the background behind him is sharp, so they don't match. So that's one more thing to look for when you're matching images together. Make sure that they have equal sharpness, especially in the area where you're putting the new subject. And finally, tip number 6 is make sure you handle reflections as well. So aside from the comical giant cat and mismatched dog in the bridge on this image, take a look at the cloud. The cloud has been added. So I cut that out of another image and placed it into this one. But you'll notice that there's no reflection in the water. So make sure that if you have a nice clean reflection like this, that you add the new object there as well. With Luminar Neo, that's really easy to do. Just select the cloud layer, duplicate it by right-clicking and choosing duplicate, or you can just press D on your keyboard. Once the layer has been duplicated, just flip it upside down this way, and then position it straight down into the water. Now, usually reflection is going to be darker and possibly even squished. So I may just resize it a little bit. And then when you place it, I'm trying to match the position of the cloud above this little shed here. Of course, you wouldn't see clouds over top of the dirt. So the blend mode that you choose is really important. Soft light does a nice job here. Can you see how much more believable that is now without our comical dog and cat? Remember this image that I added the balloon to earlier? Same problem. So I'm going to duplicate the balloon. But the cool thing about duplicating a layer in Luminar Neo is that all the edits that you applied to the original one that you copied applied here as well. So the color toning that I used to match the background image will work in the reflection also. So I'm going to flip it vertically, resize it a little smaller, and make sure that I position it above the tree line. Can you see what I'm doing here? The tree line is here, so it would appear above the tree line in the reflection as well. Let's try blend mode, something like that, because you would see the trees over top of the reflection. That makes more sense. Overlay works well here. Make sure to look for reflections anywhere. You might have a reflection in a window or a mirror in the background. So if you place an object into a background that has a reflective surface, make sure you handle that by duplicating the layer and adding the subject there as well. I have a couple of questions for you. First of all, if you've used the new background removal AI in Luminar Neo, how easy or difficult did you find it? Let me know in the comments below. And secondly, tell me honestly now, have you ever made any of these 6 mistakes? If we're being real here, I think all photographers should put up their hands, including myself. When you're first starting out, if you're brand new to this kind of editing, don't worry if you've made these mistakes. Just keep practicing. You'll get the hang of it eventually. If you haven't already purchased the extensions for Luminar Neo, or if you don't have the annual Pro plan, in order to get the extensions, if you'd like to do so, use my coupon code DPM-NEO to get a small discount if you're switching to the annual Pro plan. If you've enjoyed this tutorial and you want step-by-step instruction on how to use Luminar Neo and all of its tools, including my raw files to practice with, check out Luminar Neo, the complete course. If you want to watch another YouTube video, check out this one now. So keep practicing and try to avoid these 6 mistakes.